This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Here's a public service announcement worth repeating. Be kind to restaurants. We know restaurants have been dealing with labor shortages and shortages in food and other supplies in this pandemic. But there's also been a shortage of patience and kindness from customers. We hear about the impact on Connecticut restaurant owners and staff. That's coming up. First, we welcome back members of Connecticut Public Radio's investigative team, the Accountability Project. They've been looking at whether the juvenile justice system in Connecticut is working. Criticism has grown in recent months after a spate of car thefts in local towns. But what does the data show? Joining us now on Zoom, Walter Smith Randolph, investigative editor and lead reporter for the Accountability Project. Walter, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Great to be here.
Also with us is Jacqueline Rabe-Thomas, an investigative reporter with the Accountability Project. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You can join us as well, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Walter, your series airs this week on Connecticut Public Radio, also online at ctpublic.org. I understand it's called Juveniles, Joyrides, and Justice. Give us some background on the series.
Yeah, so the reason why we decided to do this series is because there's been a lot of talk over the summer about juveniles stealing cars and whether or not crime is on the rise and whether or not the juvenile justice system here in Connecticut is working. And so Jackie can get into more details about the facts and the numbers and what the data is showing. But we wanted to take a closer look and see if what politicians were saying was true. There's been several rallies, several press conferences at the state capitol where Republicans have said that, juvenile justice is out of control, and they're calling for a special session to talk about police accountability. But then Democrats say, look at the data. Also, we noticed that Republicans and Democrats were looking at two different sets of data. And then also there was the big story from New Britain where a 17-year-old allegedly mowed down a jogger in a stolen car. And in the process of reporting out the story, we discovered that there was somebody else chasing the 17-year-old. They were also charged in that chase as well. And we noticed that other media outlets weren't covering that. They covered the big story, but they weren't going deeper to find out what actually happened. And so we wanted to give some context, some analysis, and also to look at the numbers behind everything that's been going on this summer.
Walter, tell us about that second person charged, not a juvenile.
Not a juvenile, grown man. I'm blanking on his age right now, but the story goes according to the arrest warrant application. The 17-year-old, yes, he was in a stolen car. He did have a 15-year-old passenger as well. And he was speeding through New Britain before he allegedly, and I say allegedly because he hasn't been convicted yet, mowed down that jogger. But we also discovered that there was a gentleman who was in a car who was chasing him. And in the arrest warrant application, the gentleman said that he saw the 17-year-old steal his wallet. And so he decided to chase him for 11 miles. This gentleman called 911 and told them, and 911 said, stop chasing him. And he didn't. The 17-year-old also allegedly threw the guy's wallet out of the car, and he still chased him. And so, yeah, the 17-year-old was behind the wheel. Yes, someone died. But the question, remains to be seen. If the other guy wasn't chasing him, would the 53-year-old jogger ended up dead? And Jackie talked to the police chief in New Britain, talked to the mayor of New Britain, and they both said, if the other guy wasn't chasing him, he might still be alive.
Jackie, let's talk about the data. Walter's saying that a lot of the rhetoric out there from politicians, they're focusing on different sets of data. And so what did you look at? And what did you find?
So when you look at where these thefts are happening, it's definitely moved to the suburbs more so, which is driving a lot of fear around this issue, which has really sort of propped up this issue and put it on a lot of people's radar who maybe it was a city issue before. And going back to New Britain, when you look at car theft data there, during the early months of the pandemic, car thefts were increasing rapidly. In between the November and December months, there were 3 times as many car thefts as the same months 1 year before when the pandemic wasn't happening. But when you dive in a little bit deeper, you start to see that in the first 3 months of this year, it was only a 7% increase. So it's starting to sort of trickle down a little bit as far as the increase goes. And then the spring, there was actually a decrease in the number of car thefts compared to pre-pandemic. And then when you look at that sort of statewide, zoom out, that's the same trend. So ultimately, sort of this research question of, was this a pandemic spike or was this a juvenile justice system out of control? And what we found was that it seems like there was a spike that was correlated with the pandemic when you look at just the frequency of car thefts. We also looked into, there's been a lot of narrative around carjackings and violent offenses. And so we got some data from the crime analysis unit at the state, and we found out that only 3% of all car thefts so far this year have been associated with, a robbery, all the sort of violent offenses that could be associated with them. And we looked at a trend line and saw that didn't shift during the pandemic. It didn't seem to shift one way or the other. It was still about the same share of all offenses. And so when you sort of start to dive down into the data, it looks like this really truly was a pandemic shift. And so for the first story, which airs tomorrow, we look into New Britain, one town, and what it means for all the activities, football, Latin club, all of those sort of things, what it meant for students when things were shut down.
When you talk about car thefts in our state, the data doesn't show that children are to blame for these?
Right. So few kids are actually arrested, adults or kids. It ranges between 6% of all car thefts end in an arrest. And in some years, it's up to 12%. And so when you look at who's being arrested, you're not able to make the claim that with the data that it's actually kids driving this. Police work, on the ground police work, they'll tell you that, our insider knowledge of what this is, it is a kid's issue. And so that's sort of it's getting pinned on juveniles, but we're not able to actually show that with data.
You're hearing Jacqueline Rabe-Thomas here on Where We Live, investigative reporter for Connecticut Public Radio's Accountability Project. Also with us, Walter Smith Randolph, investigative editor and lead reporter for the Accountability Project. Jackie, you mentioned this series starting tomorrow. So let's talk about the programming that's out there that was not available during the pandemic and the ripple effects to that.
Yeah, so we looked at the court system to see, the juvenile justice system really serves as a referral system for so many teens that get involved in the system, to connect them with places like Omar McDou's football team in New Britain. Several people are required to be on his football team or another extracurricular activity so that they have a structured activity to engage in and get them on the right path. But what we found that during the pandemic, the courts really slowed down. The number of kids that were waiting for over 6 months to have their case processed and resolved more than doubled. And so what that means is you have hundreds of children who weren't being referred to services to sort of divert them from bad behavior. One of the people that we quote in the article is, idle time is a devil's playground. And so that's sort of one of the theories is that a lot of people who work with these kids is that these kids didn't have anything to do when everything shut down.
You spoke to a mother of a 15-year-old son who was one of the young people waiting for a referral. Let's hear what she shared.
So here's the thing. I did notice he was going down, the wrong path. So the thing is with the court, they wait till, the child does it multiple times or commits a very serious crime before they actually give us help. I've been asked for a program from the very first time. I guess you have to wait till you get on probation to get into programming. But also in the neighborhoods we live in, like, there's nothing for the kids to do out there. And if it is, it costs so much money. And it's difficult. Parents got to work 2 jobs, then to pay for the extra curriculum. It's just a lot. But where I live, there's nothing for these kids to do out there. See, at the time where it began, he liked to do, cooking and like beat making and, things like that. They didn't have anything like that. And even the sports, the school where, that's close to us, they still to this day don't even have a basketball team or football or baseball, none of that. But we have a baseball field out there. We have a football field. But the schools don't have any sports. Even for the girls, there's nothing for the girls to do.
Jackie, what happened to Crystal's son?
He started stealing cars early in the pandemic, and his behavior eventually landed him in a more serious system, the adult correction system. And so he is now incarcerated in an adult prison.
Walter Smith Randolph, when we hear Jackie talking to parents of children that are in the system and now the consequences that they're locked up, when we talk about, what that does to families, but also when we think about when kids have been needing help in the pandemic, that impact on mental health, that's also something that you and your team looked at.
Yes, exactly. Some of the politicians have called for transferring more children, more juvenile offenders to the adult system. And so Jackie, in her second story, actually took a look at, how there are more services now in some facilities for some of these juveniles. She actually visited, compare and contrasted a story that you did actually, Lucy, when you visited the Connecticut Juvenile Training School, and how that was shifted to a facility in Hamden where, at CJTS, they could host up to 250 juvenile offenders, and it was treated more like a prison versus a facility in Hamden where they can have just 8 boys, and they have a full team of 40 people that are tending to their mental health needs, that are tending to some of their other services. When you transfer a child into the adult system, that becomes a permanent record, and that affects the rest of their life, whether they can get a job, whether they can get housing and things like that. So Jackie took a look at the 2 different facilities to try to compare and contrast and see what would happen if some politicians got their way.
And Jackie, you spoke to Ileana Puyos, the policy director of the Connecticut Justice Alliance. Let's hear what she shared.
I think when we unpack that kind of solution, right, taking a look at the impact of being incarcerated and what that does mentally, physically, right, emotionally to a child who's ideally still developing, right? I think this notion that there's more services and resources in the adult system shouldn't call for a transfer. It should call for more investment in JJ services, right? Especially when you get into the adult system, like that's a permanent record for some of these kids, and that ultimately impacts housing access, access to career and jobs. That's a lifelong impact, and there's no room for second chance with a situation like that.
Jackie, Walter mentioned the Connecticut Juvenile Training School. It's been closed now for a few years, and so I'm wondering if you can talk more about the options for children who need a little bit more help than being referred to an after-school program.
Sure. So Connecticut has really moved in the direction of incarcerating as few children as possible. Now, sometimes that can have, the decisions to release people, there's always room for second guessing when a tragic event happens, like what happened in New Britain, and sort of reevaluating whether or not that was the right decision. But Connecticut has decided to lean more heavily on keeping youth with their families in their homes, because that's ultimately where kids will end up after they're released. And so, Connecticut has they closed a the Connecticut Juvenile Training School, which had the capacity to house up to 250 boys. The new facility that they've opened currently can only house up to 8 boys. And the idea is to just sort of wrap as much support around therapeutic support, educational support around these kids before they are sent back home so they're better equipped. Just as a sort of a setup of sort of who these kids are that are in the deep end. The typical teen that's sent to the Hampden facility is 3 years behind in high school. Some have already dropped out. Many have learning disabilities, and their school where they're coming from never identified those learning disabilities, and Hampden has identified some of those. Almost all of them have unaddressed mental health issues, and some are foster kids and the state is their parent. We spoke with Latasha Archibald, who sort of explained who these kids are and just sort of the trauma that they come from.
And when you talk with juvenile justice advocates, the idea where if you just lock up children, eventually they age out of the system. And if they don't get the help that they need now, they end up being incarcerated later in life. And so again, when we talk about ripple effects, that's the reason why you don't just want to lock up a child that needs help. And so I'm wondering, Walter, in the way that you and your team have looked at this problem, this issue that keeps coming up, we hear from politicians and also in some communities. I mean, what's the next step? Is this something that you expect the legislature to want to act on? Because again, we hear every year that there needs to be more resources, but beyond that, what action is going to happen?
Well, I think it still remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen. But if you listen to what's been going on, Republicans keep calling for a special session, and that hasn't happened. I mean, there's been special sessions to extend the governor's coronavirus emergency orders, but they haven't tackled juvenile justice. There's been talk about revisiting the police accountability law that was passed, but that hasn't happened yet. And as we get closer and closer to the next session, it seems less likely that's going to happen. And so, yeah, it remains to be seen again, what will happen at the state level.
That's Walter Smith Randolph, investigative editor and lead reporter. Also, Jacqueline Rabe-Thomas was with us, an investigative reporter on this team. Their series looking at juvenile justice starts tomorrow on Connecticut Public Radio and online. Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucine Alpathanchel. Coming up, there's a lot of attention on the global supply chain and labor shortages affecting businesses. But kindness has also been in short supply. Local restaurant owners and their staff are bearing the brunt. We talked to them after the break. You can join us too, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucine Alpathanchel. Restaurant work is hard work. Now add a pandemic to the mix. It's been a year and a half of reduced hours, staff shortages, and disruptions in food and other supplies. And it's taking a toll on restaurants' bottom line. Just last month, 7 out of 10 restaurants in Connecticut reported they were less profitable than 3 months prior. That's according to the National Restaurant Association. But there's another factor leading to a breaking point. Customers unhappy with reduced hours and menu offerings have taken their frustration out on staff. Less patience and civility in recent months has led the dining community to say, enough is enough. Here's executive chef Christian Petroni, who owns Italian restaurants in New York and Connecticut, in an Instagram video.
Please be kind to restaurants. You gotta understand that the food that is coming out of a kitchen is not coming out of a printer or a machine. It is being made by human hands. Please respect these folks. Please respect this front of the house staff that is the conduit between the guest and the kitchen. I mean, something I was never able to do, because that is truly one of the hardest things on this planet. With that being said, please, please, please be kind and think about the person and the families that are cooking your food.
That video was shared by local group Eat in Connecticut, which started a hashtag Be Kind to Restaurants social media campaign. The co-founder of Eat in Connecticut joins us now, Jeanette Darden. Jeanette, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
First off, it speaks to the times that we're in, that you have to start a social media campaign to remind people that they need to be kind.
Yes.
So tell us what made you and your other co-founder think about this. Did you see people acting a certain way? Did you hear from others in the restaurant community that were dealing with this on top of all the other stressors that I mentioned?
Absolutely. Kristen and I, we run a Facebook group, Eat in Connecticut, and we often have chefs and restaurateurs and the dining staff, reach out to us when they need help and support. And so, we realized we needed to do something because, all of us have fantastic memories when we go out to eat. But, things are a little bit different now. So we came up with this campaign to really gain a deeper appreciation for and an understanding of what's going on right now, what the restaurants are facing.
So you've been spotlighting many restaurants. What are some of the messages that you're hearing?
We're hearing that, people are coming in and not necessarily being as patient and compassionate. There may be less workers, and that doesn't mean that they can't attend to you. It just may take a few more minutes, and that's fine. You're still going to get that fantastic food and have that fantastic memory. But just be compassionate. We are all humans, right? So.
Would you say it's pretty widespread? Even when I'm out and about with my family, whether I'm going to a local coffee shop or to a restaurant, it seems like there's more and more signs on the door or at the register that reminds people that people need to be patient. And I haven't seen that before.
Yes, I think a lot of, it's a great campaign. We're seeing it all over the state and we're seeing it all over the country. People are coming out and they're recognizing that, wait, we need to be kind to our fellow neighbors.
Well, one of the restaurants that you've featured on the Be Kind to Restaurants social media campaign is the North House, and April Gibson joins us now. She's executive chef there. This is a restaurant in Avon, Connecticut. April, welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning.
So tell me a little bit about the message that you shared. It was really very candid. The final lines were, "It's not hard, just be nice." So tell me about, what was the breaking point for you where you felt like you needed to share what you and your other teammates were dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Well, at the end of the day, the smaller staffs are working harder. They're working more. And I had just a really bad night, and I was able to get my emotions out, and Jeanette was so great and got it up. And, we all work so hard. Every employee in every restaurant are struggling, and it's less and less people working. I have 4 cooks in my kitchen to do 150, 200 people. So at the end of the day, we get really strung out and just we're exhausted. And, Dylan will fill you in that, guests just aren't as happy to go out anymore. It's almost, like a chore,
You mentioned Dylan. Dylan Reis is the general manager at the North House. Dylan, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So are you more on the front of the house? So tell me some of the experiences, exchanges that you've had or heard from customers.
Well, 99.9% of the time, everyone is absolutely happy to come out. And I feel like most people are understanding. But lately, more and more, not so much. I had a friend of mine the other day, also works in a restaurant, put up a payment slip, and somebody wrote on it, "Get more help." If we could get more help, we definitely would, and it would make things a little bit easier. But it's the interactions and responses like that make this so much harder for the time being. I have a lot of the regulars that come in that are very understanding. They'll sit there and, they see the interactions with other guests that aren't so understanding as well. And it's baffling sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So how long has it been like this, Dylan?
Well, I'd say the last 4 months or so. I think as the summer was starting to wind down a little bit, it's starting to get increasingly tougher, especially with people's schedules changing. And, when it gets cold and dreary, people want to go out and they want to go out to have fun and eat and have that nice experience. And that's their getaway, for not being stuck in the house. And when you can't walk into a restaurant because they're understaffed and have already committed to feeding, 150, 200 other people that night, it's a little disheartening to have to turn somebody away. That's the last thing anybody wants to do. And so I think that that's also, gains to those frustrations from guests as well as, the restaurateurs.
April, I had mentioned that Instagram post that was shared by Eden, Connecticut. And your first sentence, you say, the simple answer is that so many things are beyond our control. And so give us a behind the scenes look of what you and your staff are dealing with when we think about labor shortages, also supply chain disruptions, what that's doing to your bottom line and how it makes you have to then adapt your menu and maybe not having some of the things that your regulars are used to you having.
So my main distributor is PFG. We're closed Monday, Tuesdays, but myself and 2 other of my employees go in on Tuesdays to ensure that if we do have a delivery issue, we can rectify it and, we're good to go for Wednesday. But I'm there anywhere from 9 a.m. The truck will be there sometimes at 8:30 in the morning waiting for me. Other times it doesn't show until 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then we have to put everything away, make sure everything is organized and clean and taken care of. And then, sometimes we'll be there till 6 o'clock on a Tuesday when we're not even open. Menu wise, I try to appease as many different palates that come through our doors as possible. And sometimes, I just don't have something we can please. I feel that for the staff, I have a pretty well-rounded menu, kind of hits all the points. But, we're still not doing brunch as much as I would love to do a brunch service. I just simply don't have the staff to put the extra hours on. And I think some of our guests don't really like that too much, huh, Dylan?
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I miss brunch as well. The duck hash was great. But, until we can get a few more bodies, there's just certain things that we can't do, and we don't really want to not do those things. We love to bring raw bar and all that stuff back, but that also goes to food costs, and it's just kind of crazy right now.
So tell us more about the staffing issues that the North House is experiencing. How far back do they go? And, because we're hearing anecdotally that this has been an issue in lots of different small businesses, Dylan, but tell us what about you've been seeing at the North House?
Well, since the whole, pandemic even started, most places being closed and laying everybody off, that instantly, hurts the staffing right there, because you have to lay certain people off even when you do reopen, because you're not busy enough to bring those certain people back. And so, that creates people either going elsewhere or finding a new outlet and a new, career change. In the last few months, a lot of the team that we've had for several years, which is, pretty cool to have all the same faces around. We're pretty much a family, but recently, some of those employees that we have are in college, and, school comes first and they have to put that forward. And so, they're cutting their hours back a little bit, and it's really hard to get anybody to come through the doors these days. Beforehand, I would have 10, 15 people a week come through and put an application in. And since this whole thing has happened, it's been pretty hard. And the ones that, people don't want to give up their weekends. And, I can understand that, but Fridays and Saturdays and holidays, and, that's a lot of time that you're giving up and giving to work. And so I think that's part of it as well.
So when you look at your staffing today, how does that compare to pre-pandemic?
Well, I used to, any given Friday, Saturday night in our busy season, I would have, 3 bussers, 3 runners, an expediter. I'd have 3 at the host stand. I could have up to 8 to 10 servers depending on, how many covers we were doing that night. And right now, still in our busy season, this past Saturday, I had one host on the host stand because of homecoming. And I have, one busser, one food runner, and 3 servers. And that's to do, about 150 people. And part of that issue is if you can't get hands in the kitchen, we can't expand to do more numbers. So I can't even bring on more of a front of house staff, even if I could find them. So it's just kind of that trickle down effect that hasn't been helping.
April Gibson, what keeps you going each day that you're coming back to the North House? And because this seems to be a pandemic that has had a lot of stressors over the months, and it's 18 months now, and it doesn't seem like things are improving. So how do you keep going?
Well, that's a hard question. No, it's more just a sense of pride. Getting up and doing so much with so little. I'm impressed day in, day out by what we do accomplish. It's that sitting down at the end of the night when the rush is over, and then you can just finally breathe. That is one of the most amazing feelings that I think I can have. Ultimately, it's that, wow, we just did this, and wow, we just did that, and we're going to do it again tomorrow and the next day. And, we have a really good time. We try to keep things as light and fun as possible because it's so stressful and it gets so complicated and not always the best of vibes in the kitchen, but we get through it. And at the end of the day, we're a team, and we take care of each other the best we can.
Dylan, do you share that same sentiment?
Oh, definitely. I've been at the North House since day one. I'm the opening manager there, and I've seen a lot of faces come and go, and I've seen most of them have stuck around. And like I said earlier, the retention has been great. So seeing a lot of those same faces every day just makes you more of a family instead of just coworkers. We like to do a good product. We like to have good service. We like to see those same faces coming back, and, people driving from a few hours away just to come have the duck breast on a Sunday night, and, driving an hour away to come have our desserts that we make in-house. It's things like that that make us keep doing what we're doing and enjoy doing so. It's very rewarding. Seeing all the people smiling and saying, hey, we can't wait to come back and we want to have a party or do a large event here. That's the most satisfying feeling in the world.
You've been hearing Dylan Reis and April Gibson from the North House and Avon. Before we head to break, I wanted to go back to Jeanette Darden, co-founder of Eating Connecticut, which is this local group that started the social media campaign, Be Kind to Restaurants. Jeanette, how do you respond when you hear April and Dylan just talking about, what the last few months and weeks have been like? Do you hear from others where, it's time for them, they think maybe it's time for me to throw in the towel, it's just too much?
I have to be honest, I don't hear people saying they're going to throw in the towel. Instead, I hear people like April and Dylan who truly love what they do and will continue on. They'll get through this just like we get through anything else. This is not something that's going to stop them in their tracks. These are incredible hard workers. And again, just when you go out, say a special thank you to them. These people are working more hours than you can possibly imagine.
That's Jeanette Darden, again, co-founder of Eating Connecticut. Jeanette, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. April and Dylan from the North House will stay with us. And after the break, we'll hear from another restaurant owner about what it's like to work in the hospitality industry in the pandemic. What's been your experience? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. Or share a comment on our Facebook page or find us on Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today we're checking back in with local restaurants. They're giving us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like to work in the hospitality industry, an industry that's been struggling with staff shortages and supply chain disruptions. Restaurant owners and their staff are also asking for patience. It's the message behind a social media campaign called Be Kind to Restaurants. With us on Zoom is April Gibson, executive chef at the North House, and Dylan Reis, who's general manager at the North House. Before we hear from another restaurant owner, April and Dylan, I wanted you to respond to something someone shared with us on Twitter. When we talk about the labor shortages in the pandemic, this person says, rather than be kind, maybe we should be fighting to bring equitable and fair wages and benefits to those in the service industry. I'm sure you've heard that in the last 18 months. How do you respond, April?
I actually agree with that statement 110%. Work-life balance is so crucial to things like mental health and just general well-being. And we are offering fair wages, fair scheduling, where we're not just going to tack on 1 million hours on you. We try to not have someone work every single holiday. We feed the staff. I think we do a really good job taking care of people. We do have health insurance packages available to full-time staff. It's just something that's, it's so complicated. If you go on Indeed, and you scroll through all these job listings, there's incentives to work, like $1,000 sign-on bonuses, and there's still urgently hiring tags on all of these ads, myself included. I have an ad up if anyone wants to come and apply. That would be great. But yeah, my dishwashers are paid well above what minimum wage is, which is now $15 an hour, I believe. Yes. So we don't give people the bare minimum because we can't expect the bare minimum. It's hard work and it takes a lot, and we definitely take care of our staff as a whole with all of that, actually.
I wanted to bring another perspective. With us on Zoom now is Jared Schulefand, owner, operator, and chef at Home Restaurant in Branford. Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us what you and your staff have been experiencing over the last, 18 or so months.
Yeah, so it's the same experience that every other restaurant is. At the beginning of the pandemic, with shutdowns and government regulations and everything, made what's already a difficult business almost impossible. And then within the last 6 months to a year, with everything opening back up, it's the labor shortage, not being able to find help. Where I'm sure April and Dylan can agree with me that it wasn't easy to find help before this all started, but it's gotten even more difficult. And then just the products being unavailable, or prices just increasing anywhere from 30 to 150%. On a weekly basis.
And so with staffing shortages, what did you do? Bring in family to help?
Well, my dad actually already worked for me before the pandemic, so that helped, obviously, in the beginning. And myself being a chef, bartender, server, I do it all. So, I had it a little bit easier than some in the beginning of the pandemic, because when we were just doing takeout, I was able to almost do it all by myself, and then slowly start to bring people in as we got busier. But yeah, it's just kind of, it's also limited seating. Like they said, we're still at this point, 18 months out, not serving lunch during the week, where we usually did 6 days a week, lunch and dinner. And I just don't have the staff to be able to offer, every meal period that we usually would.
Mm. So I understand that you started Main Street Hospitality, which is actually helping you and your competitors. Tell us about that, the idea behind it.
Yeah, so myself and a colleague, actually a friend first and then a colleague, started a consulting group where, basically it got to a point where I had enough staff for the takeout business we were doing, because I didn't open for dine-in right away. And then I kept, seating limited. So I had some time to be able to leave my restaurant a little bit. And so we started a consulting firm, I helped a friend open up a restaurant, and then we started picking up other clients where we would basically just try to help them maximize what little profitability there already is in restaurants. I mean, restaurants were already just a game of pennies. There was no profit margin before the pandemic, and now it's gotten even less and less. So a lot of it is just to help other restaurant owners who aren't as well versed in the business as I am to operate. We help recruitment, we help with financials. We basically help all aspects of what restaurants are needing right now.
And how long have you been in business, Jared?
So Home has been open for 9.5 years, almost 10 years now. And then the consulting firm we've been doing for about a little over a year now.
So you've got this experience under your belt. And so when you think about others around you, your competitors who may not be as experienced, this idea when we hear about the chain supply disruptions, driving costs way up. So how do you band together to help with those financial stresses?
A lot of it is just awareness. What Eat in Connecticut is doing is amazing. The fact that you guys are having us on NPR is amazing. Just making sure that the general public is aware that, if your prices at your local restaurant are rising, it's not because of greedy restaurant owners. It's because, it's costing us a lot of money to put the food on a plate. And I could almost guarantee that anybody who's serving chicken wings right now is losing money on chicken wings. There's a lot of different products like that I'm pushing my restaurants that I consult for to either take them off the menu or limit them. I usually change my menu twice every 6 months. And I'm actually doing it now after 3 months, just because of, the quality of products, whether it's romaine or onions or, just the price of, anything between chicken and steak and beef and stuff like that.
So it's football season.
Yeah, a lot of it's awareness.
Yeah. You just said that no one's making money off chicken wings. When I think of the football
Definitely
season,
not.
I think chicken wings on Sunday. So the costs have risen up that much?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's, it's something I took it off my menu. Before the Super Bowl last year, I think it was January, a case of chicken wings was anywhere from $90 to $100. Now, if you can find them for less than $170 for a case, you're lucky. It's almost impossible to find fresh and not frozen. There's a lot of products like that people just don't realize. And I think a lot of it is the awareness, which is why it's great that you guys are having us on.
And so, everyone's hoping for an end in sight to this, but it's also winter's coming, the weather's getting colder. How do you see that impacting your business, Jared?
Like I said, it's a lot of it is changing up the menu, trying to do heartier foods that are gonna, cost us less to produce, or, making smaller menus. I mean, and again, it's something that you said in the beginning of the segment is customers aren't very understanding of having small limited menus, but a lot of times, it's just what we can handle and make sure that we're giving out the best product that we possibly can without overextending our staff or ourselves or our product supply.
April Gibson still with us from the North House. April, how do you respond to what Jared's trying to do down where he is?
So when we had first reopened, I think I started with a dinner menu with about six items, and it was just my Sue and myself. So at the North House, we have 3 separate kitchens. So we actually moved from our main kitchen into a temporary setup, and we are able to utilize our banquet area and put out about 20 tables outside. But the way everything is set up, you have to set yourself up for success. Just like Jared was saying, smaller menus, make it make sense for the staff. Is it preppable? Is it cost effective? And now that I have a few extra staff and we're kind of getting back into a sense of normalcy, I have since extended the menu, and, same thing, like I'm not having my ducks that Dylan just threw out there on a Sunday night. I have to go through a whole different company to get a similar product, which I'm not really sure what I'm going to get. It's usually kind of a dice roll. And yeah, costs are going up through the roof where, I'm like, oh, maybe we should just cut down on portion sizes. And then people, aren't always the most understanding on that. That way I don't have to in turn raise my prices. It's trying to find that happy medium of just getting through this until things calm down, I guess.
Jared, what are some of the silver linings to the work that you're doing?
Just that people are willing to work together. I feel like, a lot of restaurateurs and GMs before the pandemic, it was almost concentrating too much on competition, which I always thought was a mistake, and pitting one restaurant against another, where now it really feels like a community. The Connecticut Restaurant Association has done a lot for all of us. And each individual town as well has helped their restaurants, but it just feels like everybody is willing to work together and, be one industry, one voice, and, really help each other out. That's a lot of the stuff that I was kind of surprised with when I started the consulting firm, because, I was helping out. I still consult for 2 restaurants in the same town as my restaurant. And, it's not competition. It's trying to figure out how we can all work together to make this work. And I feel like restaurant owners and GMs and chefs are now more receptive to working with their competitors instead of against them, and just kind of coming together and making this happen.
We started this segment talking about the movement Be Kind to Restaurants. Jared, what have you been hearing from your customers?
So I'm very, very fortunate that I have a really loyal following. So I haven't seen too much of what other restaurants are seeing. I have heard from my colleagues how terrible it has been. But, for the most part, unless it's a brand new customer that just happened to wander in during a busy shift and not realize that, they needed a reservation or anything like that, we've been pretty fortunate. It's almost really the only time we get a little bit of flack is if we're out of an item, which again is these days completely out of our control. I mean, we'll have an order on item or an item on order, and when our distributor shows up, that's when we find out we're not getting it, or and from what I hear, it's happening to them too. They're getting shortage as well, the distributors. But besides for that, we've been very fortunate. But yeah, I've heard a lot of the same stories of just people not understanding wait times, or people leaving, telling people to hire more staff, which obviously we are all trying. I mean, every restaurant that I consult for is hiring right now, and including my own. But yeah, it's just a lot of lack of patience, I feel like.
You've been hearing Jared Schulefand here on Where We Live. He's owner, operator, and chef at Home Restaurant in Branford. Jared, thank you for coming on. We enjoyed hearing from you.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us today was April Gibson and Dylan Reis from the North House in Avon. April and Dylan, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Enjoy.
Thank you. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Today's show produced by Katie Pellico. Our technical producer is Kat Pastor. You can download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Coming up tomorrow, we know live theater has come back to life, but that doesn't mean theater is completely back to normal. On the next Where We Live, we hear from local theaters about what's coming to the stage this fall while keeping actors and patrons safe. We hope you join us.